Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Vintner's Vision here at CentralCoastLive.com. I'm your host this week, Pepper Daniels, the program director of The Crush 92.5, our very own wine country radio station here on the Central Coast of California. Got a great show for you tonight, and I want to let you know you can follow us along, of course, here at CentralCoastLive.com. We're taking chat questions right directly on the website. You'll see it right next to our pretty faces on your monitor. And you want to find us on Facebook or Twitter, just look Vintner's Vision and put that after the backslash, and you'll be able to find us online and stay up to date with all the episodes and all the things that we've got going on here. So we're excited tonight. It's going to be a very different episode for me. We're going to be talking about cheese and port wines and some really exciting guests with us here. Starting on my right, it is Steve and Lola Glossner of Paso Port Wine Company. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Ladies and gentlemen. And on the left side is Danica Reed. She's the owner of Vivant Fine Cheeses at downtown Paso Robles. So how about a cheers, everyone? Cheers. Welcome. We're excited to have you here. Let's get started on the wine side with a little bit of your background, your history. Tell us about how you got into wine in the first place, and then how it evolved into, other than sneaking.
How much time do we have?
Yeah, other than sneaking it when you were a child. Tell us about your interest and how it started.
Well, I mean, everyone in the industry has their own story as far as how they got involved. I went to undergraduate school on the East Coast, interviewed for various financial positions in the New York City metro area. Found out that most of the jobs were below ground level at that point in time, and so I ended up moving with a friend, which was supposed to be a temporary move, to Buffalo, New York, and ended up getting a job at the oldest wine shop in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
Actually, they had the third liquor license in the state of New York after the repeal of Prohibition.
Wow, you look great for your age.
Yeah, so they had, it was a multi-generational shop. They had a lot of nice wine in there, and it just all kind of rolled from there. And a little over 20 years ago, I moved out to California to get involved in the industry, so it sort of was a second career, but I never really started my first career at that point in time, and I've been out here ever since.
Yeah, so did it take right away then when you went into the wine shop for the first time? Like, this is something I could get into?
It was the first time as a young adult that something felt like it clicked, that it was interesting, you know, because wine combines science, a little bit of artistic, motivation, and there's also a lot of history involved with it. So it combines a lot of different things.
It's exciting that we get Lola here tonight, the wife of a winemaker, because we hardly ever get that perspective. But we hear about the winemaker's wife, the poor winemaker widow, they call her sometimes.
She's got a book going.
I will have a book someday.
You will have a book someday. Is he tooling? He's kind of like tooling in the garage or the shop at all hours of the night, tinkering and.
Sometimes he does, yes.
Yeah.
Or the winery, or the wine cellar. So.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into it.
Well, I came from a manufacturing background, aerospace to be specific, and always had a passion for wine since I graduated college. Decided that I wanted to self-study, so I did back in the late 80s and early 90s, and had a good career, but decided, late 90s that wine is where I wanted to be, so I ended up buying some property up here in Paso Robles, and through a mutual friend, met Steve, and that kind of clicked our relationship, and so that's how we got together.
And you're originally from?
Southern California.
Southern California. Excellent, excellent. And cheese. How does the lifelong passion for cheese take effect to get to a point where you have a fine cheese shop?
Well, I was a dairy science major at Cal Poly,
Okay.
and I worked in the corporate cheese world for 12 years, basically, buying and selling truckloads, and never saw the cheese, never got to touch it or feel it or see my customers really. I'm going to grade stuff on paper and sell it and buy it. Then for my last 2 years before I opened Vivant, I worked for a company in Wisconsin, so I was commuting from here to Wisconsin 2 weeks a month here and 2 weeks a month there.
Oh, wow.
So I got a little burned out on that. And,
I can imagine.
So I decided I wanted to move home. I'm originally from here from the Paso area, and there aren't any good jobs here for cheese people, believe it or not. And it's odd, but so I decided to get back into the real cheese business, where I can see my customers and I can touch the cheese and really get into the smelling and tasting and pairing of it. And this is just all kind of fell into place because it's a great time to be in this business right now, because the wineries are growing rapidly, and it's fun to have a winery, but it's and for the taster also, it's fun to have a wine tasting experience, but it's a lot more fun to have a wine and cheese tasting experience.
Right.
There's a lot, they can go down the road and taste a lot of wines, but when they get to the wine and cheese, they really get excited about it.
And not only do you do that at your shop, but you also supply cheese for wineries who do it all over the place, right?
Wineries and restaurants and gourmet gift shops and retailers from pretty much a 50-mile radius here from Paso, all over the Central Coast.
And it really is part of the lifestyle here on the Central Coast, because not only are we tasting wine all the time, now we're doing wine and cheese, and now we're doing olive oil.
Right.
Now we're doing bacon. Now we're doing butter. Now we're doing whiskey. Now we're doing cigars. Right? This is what's happening in Paso Robles, right? Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot of great wines to get to. Technically, we have 2 table wines, and then the rest our other wines are port wines. And I want to start with the very basics, because this is the region of the wine world that I don't know that much about, port in general. So let's talk about the difference between what's commonly referred to as table wine versus what's commonly referred to as port.
Sure. And when I started doing it, I didn't know that much about it either, and sort of learned by doing to a certain extent when it comes to making the port style wines. And I'm still learning as each year goes by, as far as how to fine tune it. But when you're talking about table wine, you're basically talking about grapes that you're picking, fermentation, the yeast are taking all the sugar and converting it over to alcohol, so that you're left with no residual sugar in it. So essentially it's a dry wine.
Some people might think table wine is sort of a generic term for just house wine, but it's actually, it means not fortified wine.
Right, in a sense. I mean, they're actually, from the government standpoint, if you're under 14% alcohol, you can, rather than state your alcohol, you can actually state table wine.
Oh, really?
On it instead,
I didn't know that.
if you wanted to. But when you get to the fortified wines, yes, you're looking at, everything kind of starts out the same way. You're picking your grapes, you're working with them, the fermentation starts. But with the fortified wines, you're taking fortification spirit, and at some point in time during that fermentation process, you're adding it, which basically then kills off the yeast, stops the fermentation, and you're left with a certain amount of residual sugar in the wine at that point in time. And a little bit of that is the style of the port you're making, the type of grapes you're using, the country of origin that it's coming from, and that also deals with the type of spirit that you're adding as well.
And Steve and Lola brought us a variety of styles of port that we're going to get to, different approaches to it. So it comes from Portugal, right? I mean, it's simple as port.
Officially, at
Portugal.
this point in time, is officially a fortified beverage of Portugal.
Yeah, it's almost like champagne. You
Right.
can't make champagne,
Correct.
or you can't call it champagne,
Correct.
unless you're in Champagne, and
Correct.
that's sort of the same. You have to do it this specific way the Portuguese do it, correct?
Yes, I mean, every country has some history of working with fortified wines. Every major wine-producing country has some sort of history of making fortified-style wines. But when you really are talking about port, and it's unfortunate because most people, when they think of port, they're thinking specifically of a fortified-style wine. But by definition, port is a product of the Douro Valley of Portugal.